Hey there, how there, ho there. It's Jeff Cutter Diamond welcoming you to yet another Cutter Top 10 video. And today's Cutter Top 10 sports video is the biggest college football in history. That's the jokes. College football is known for um, their everyone's favorite thing, and they like it so much. So anyhow, um, that's what happens. And as I write down one that and all that. So yeah, there are a lot of like chokes that can happen at any time, anywhere. And these are the biggest. Number 10 is the miracle at Michigan 94 between the Buffaloes and the Wolverines. So the 94 Colorado Buffaloes were 4 years removed from a national title, which was controversial to say the least because of the whole fifth down play and the Rocket Ishmael penalty that should never have been. They were in Michigan. Cordell Stewart, who was a decent junior quarterback, third year quarterback, would take on Michigan. The game on ABC with the great Keith Jackson calling it. It was late in the game. Stewart, with 4 seconds left, decided to throw a massive Hail Mary. You hear a lot about Hail Marys, but his was magical. It was 60 yards in the air. It wasn't like, you know, like short of the goal. He throws it, and then a tip later, Michael Westbrook of Colorado snagged it in the end zone, although the tip was kind of on purpose. He made the catch, and Keith Jackson's call. Let's it go. The people downfield, up in the air, caught. Touchdown. Caught by Westbrook for a touchdown. Incredible. And that was just an amazing moment for Colorado to beat Michigan. Colorado, I think this led them to the Cotton Bowl, if memory serves me right. Or no, that was the year. I think they went to the Orange Bowl that year. Can't remember, but regardless of that, that was one of the most heartbreaking moments in Michigan history, and all that. That was a massive choke. Number 9 is the 2016 national championship game between Clemson and Bama. Clemson and Bama had this great rivalry, and somehow, in some way, in the college football playoff, they would meet each other in the final. It usually happened. Alabama beat Clemson the previous year to win the 2015-16 championship. And then 16-17, Clemson was looking for a revenge trip in Tampa against Bama. It was close down the middle. Bama thought they had it, but they left it too much time in Deshaun Watson's hands, and Deshaun led the team down the field and threw a floating ball to Hunter Renfrow with a W. The touchdown with 1 second left to stun Crimson Tide and give Clemson their national title, their first since 1981. So that was just brutal and all that, to say the least. Number 8 is Notre Dame in the 2012 BCS championship game. Now, this wasn't really like a massive one-game choke. It just is practically that Notre Dame looked pretty impressive. They were going to the national title game. Alabama beat Georgia to get to the title game against Notre Dame. Notre Dame had everything going for them. They were undefeated. They didn't have to play a conference championship game because they're not in a conference. So Notre Dame felt confident. Unfortunately, they lost 42-14 to Alabama, and, everything happened for a reason. But what's also more important was that the Alabama Crimson Tide took advantage of Notre Dame having some off-field issues, including Manti Te'o, the linebacker, who said that his girlfriend from Hawaii had passed away. And anyway, that was huge and all that. Died of cancer. Unfortunately, Manti got catfished by some guy who turned into a girl later on. But anyhow, he had a crush on Manti Te'o and posed as a girl and all that. So that was kind of awkward and all that. And Teo would be basically scoring in his NFL career for that. Okay, so we go to another one. Number 7 is Texas A&M versus UCLA 2016. This was a massive game, a Sunday game that Fox would broadcast live from the Rose Bowl, not the the Rose Bowl Stadium, not the actual Rose Bowl, because there's difference between the UCLA stadium stuff and the real Rose Bowl, especially with most seats actually being covered for UCLA home games. So it was a big game. A&M had a 38-13 lead, if memory serves me correctly, against UCLA. And it looked like it was over for UCLA. But then somehow, in some way, Josh Rosen put on a Dan Marino-like comeback and took out A&M, including the fake spike to lure A&M through. And then he threw the ball into the end zone with like 30 seconds left. LA shocks A&M and all that. It did give Josh Rosen better stats to go to Arizona, but with the Cardinals, he sucked and all that. Number 6 is the 1984 Orange Bowl between Nebraska and Miami. Miami were a decent team on the rise because their college actually almost killed football off in the 70s, but they kept going and all that. The school at which Jim Kelly played for Miami before handing off to Brady Kosar to be the starting quarterback. The Canes would be great, and by winning their division, I think, or something. No, they were actually what they call independent. So they would face the Big Eight. Well, what was called the Big Eight at the time, champion Nebraska, because that championship would be like a bowl tie-in. Back in the day, there would be bowl tie-ins that winners of certain conferences would have to be in certain games. Like the Southwest Conference winner would be in the Cotton Bowl. The Orange Bowl would host the Big Eight winner. The Sugar Bowl would probably host the SEC champion, and the Rose Bowl would host the Big Ten and Pac-10 champ. But anyway, Miami would play Nebraska. Nebraska were dominant. They scored almost 50 points per game. They were one of the best offenses ever. But Miami kept them going, even though Nebraska got a touchdown on the Dean Steinkuhler fumblerooski play where the ball was left on the ground and nobody touched it. Nebraska ended up coming close. And then there was a lateral to Jeff Smith who snuck it in the end zone for a touchdown. Nebraska was down by 1 point with 30 seconds left. But instead of kicking the extra point for the tie, they decided to go for 2 and all that and missed. Miami won the game. Now, a lot of people said that, it was kind of a dumb move. But Tom Osborne did say he was going to go for 2 if the time comes and skew the extra point. The trouble is the extra point would have had Nebraska tie Miami. Before 1995, games could end in a tie after 4 quarters. There was no overtime. So Nebraska could have tied Miami and win the national championship that way. I would have loved it, though. That was just me. Number 5 is the Michigan State game, in which Michigan had the ball and it looked like they were going to win the game. They had like 20 seconds left. They were set up for a punt to take time off the clock against Michigan State and knock those undefeated Spartans out. It was a big battle. And then Michigan had trouble with the snap. It was a botched punt. And then it rolled for Jalen Watts Jackson. And somehow he managed to cross the line. And Sean McDonough, who was doing the game for ABC, said, Jalen Watts Jackson, he scores on the final play of the game. You could hear a massive voice crack. Sean McDonough is known for his voice cracks. But yeah, Michigan beat Michigan State, and then the guy just with the hands on top of the head and all that, looking shocked through his glasses. It looked like one of my former coworkers, but it wasn't. Anyhow, Michigan couldn't believe it. A botched punt ruined the game against Michigan State, and MSU. I believe that was when they got to the Cotton Bowl, if memory serves me correctly. Or was it? Or I think they went to the semifinals of the college football playoff, but Alabama beat the shit out of them. Yes, that's what it is. I remember that now. All right. Number 4 is one way back in the day, 1969, between Harvard and Yale. Harvard were a great football school and all that. Unfortunately, though, they were not eligible for the bowl games because they played in what they called the Ivy League, and they didn't believe in playoffs and all that. So Harvard could have been like a top tier team. I think. Oh shit! Did I screw up the year? Sorry, it was 1968. My bad. Not 69. Harvard Yale. My fault. But yeah, Harvard was looking pretty dominant to win the Ivy League. Yale came through. They were a decent school themselves. Harvard was up by 16 points with a couple of minutes left. And then Yale somehow flipped a couple, or was it the other way around? No, yeah. Was it the other way around? I have a feeling I flipped everyone around. Yeah, Harvard beat Yale. Yeah, my fault. Yale was winning 29th at 13, and then Harvard scored two touchdowns in the final 2.5 minutes. I apologize. I knew someone was up 29-13. I thought it was Harvard looking good, not Yale. But anyway, yeah, so Yale was looking good, and then Harvard scored two touchdowns in 2 minutes, 38 seconds. Both times needing to go for 2 points to tie to do it. Because in college football, unlike the NFL, not till 1994, you could go for two instead of the extra point. So they went for two twice and and tied the game. The Harvard Crimson said the newspaper article, Harvard beats Yale 29-29. So that was just amazing how Yale blew it. Yeah, blew it. Number 3 is the 2006 Rose Bowl, USC Texas. I know it should be higher, but I feel in a way that, you know, things happen for a reason. The other two looked pretty good. Anyway, USC Texas without each other. It was the most anticipated 1-2 game in God knows how long. And the first 1-2 in the Rose Bowl since, I believe, 1962, 63, if I remember correctly. Never mind. SC would face Texas. Texas were always number 2 on the season. Number 1 was USC. They did have that 30-game winning streak, and Texas was undefeated too. I rashly said maybe Texas will beat USC because someone has to beat USC eventually. And yeah, it was a great game. Both teams had some great offense and defensive moments. SC made a massive boo boo. They were on 4th and 1 at their own, 35 or something yard line. All they had to do was punt, put Texas in a bad position, and Vince Young might not have scored the winning touchdown. But they went for it on 4th and 1 in their own territory. Poof. Texas stopped them somehow. And then Vince Young on 4th and 5 caught the corner of the end zone and Keith Jackson's last college football game and won the national championship. SC would have their own problems a couple years later when they were implicated on improper benefits towards Reggie Bush. But that's a different story. Number 2 is the 3 plays that stunned the world. Oklahoma, Boise State, 2007 Fiesta Bowl. Oklahoma was a very good football school. Boise State was an afterthought. Sure, they did well in the early 2000s and all that, but they were in a mid-major conference and nobody gave a shit about them. They played Louisville in a famous Liberty Bowl game in which both teams were undefeated, but they didn't go to a BCS game because they were in non-BCS conferences, if you will. Nevertheless, a couple years later, Boise State would face Oklahoma in the Fiesta Bowl when Fox had college football games, bowl games and all that. And the great Tom Brenneman, I know you all think he's hated and all that, but I think he made his bet. He lied in it, and CW has him for college football. Nevertheless, it was a big game. Oklahoma looking pretty good against Boise State. But Jared Zabrensky threw a pick 6, and Oklahoma looked like they were going to win. It was 4th and 16 with a lot of time left. Zabrensky managed to throw a pass to James, who I can't remember who got the lateral, but James threw the lateral to the Boise State player, and somehow Oklahoma didn't see the lateral happen. That's when you throw a little backwards pass, which is legal, and if it goes wrong, it's a fumble. But anyway, Boise ran into the end zone and somehow crossed the goal line, touchdown, ties the game. Oklahoma scored in overtime on an Adrian Peterson touchdown run and this was the first time he would play in a college game attended by Adrian Peterson Sr., who actually ended up finally getting out of jail. Anyway, Boise State had a 4th and 5, and then they decided to do a trick play in which Vinny Pereira would catch the ball, and then he threw a touchdown. I don't think it was not Sabransky. Sabransky was in motion, and it snuck in the end zone. Boise decided to go for two and basically knock out the big boys before. Yeah, I can't remember. I think it was Charles Davis on Fox who said, as a color commentator, he says, at one point you gotta stop playing with the big boys, look it up with the big boys, and go for it. And then Brenneman goes, Boise State for the win. He hands it off to Johnson. Boise State has won the Tostitos Fiesta Bowl. Can you believe it? In a massive move, Sabransky faked the quick throw to the right, and then behind his back, he handed the ball to Ian Johnson. Nobody saw number 41 there, and Boise State won the game. What's even more impressive was that Ian Johnson used his fame to actually propose to the Boise State head cheerleader. You can't make this shit up. And number one is the kick six from 2013, Alabama Auburn. So anyway, Alabama was a pretty decent school. Everyone knows that. They would take on Auburn. Alabama was number one. Auburn, I think, was number 4 or something like that in the nation. So, you had 2 top 5 teams battling each other in the Iron Bowl, the Battle of Alabama, if you will. Auburn got to host this event, and a couple weeks earlier, they had a massive touchdown off of a Georgia player to win the game against the Bulldogs. So Alabama attempted a 57-yard field goal. Even if they missed, as long as nothing happened, we would be going to overtime. Classic. However, the kick was wide, and then Chris Davis, who was within a yard of touching the back line and making the play illegal, got the ball in the end zone and was legally allowed to run it out of the end zone. So he did. He went down the left-hand side with a couple of blockers. He shocked everyone by going to the left side. Touchdown, Auburn. They shock Alabama on the kick six, ruining Alabama's national title hopes. It was just one heck of a moment. And I can't remember the Auburn radio announcer, but he died a couple years ago. But he made that passionate call. And, I would say Mansick? No, that's the head coach. But anyway, Auburn did all that. I like to say that thank goodness Arkansas didn't really choke. Although, I do want to say that the 2025 Razorbacks kind of choked. They started off 2-0, and then they had 2 one-possession losses to Memphis and Tennessee, I think. Yeah, they were close. They were close to winning their next 2 games. So if everything went in their stead, they would have been 4-0. They got romped by Notre Dame, but that's beyond the point. Arkansas lost those 2 close games and 8 more the rest of the way. As Arkansas ended on a 10-game losing streak and having the tie for the worst mark in Arkansas football history. Fuck. Anyway, I'm going to do